Hi, I'm Naomi, VP Revenue at Wix Answers, and I'm here with Inban Lemire, Director of Knowledge Management at Deloitte Advisory. Today, we'll be discussing lessons learned the hard way, maintaining customer centricity with knowledge management. Thanks for being here with us today. Before we begin, I want to note that this session has been pre-recorded, so we will both be able to answer the live Q&A during the session with the widget on your screen. So let's get started. So with this new working environment, why is knowledge management so important?
So I think that moving to the remote work was a huge disruption for organizations, and it affected the main three elements of the work environment. The first one is the work and the work processes, the way we conduct our day-to-day processes. The second one is the workforce, the human capital, the skills, the people. And the third one is the workspace. Actually, this week we're going to publish the Deloitte Human Capital Trends Report, and it has an interesting data in the term. We know there that 3 out of 4 organizations will keep on working remotely with at least 20% of their employees. So we understand that this thing is here to stay. We're going to keep on working in the hybrid environment, in the remote work. So we need to find ways, and we need to invest in ways we can share and collaborate around with teams around the hybrid environment when some people are at the office and some are working remotely. So we need to invest and to make sure that people can intuitively and easily communicate and share knowledge together.
It's easy for us to say intuitively and easily, but companies are definitely struggling with this. And whether you're scaling up right now or you're scaling down, we're finding that companies are very much struggling with knowledge management, both internally and externally. So whether it has to do with customer facing or just even syncing your entire company across org, different teams. We'll talk to a little bit of that and some of the best practices later, but it's definitely been like one of the top priorities for companies these days, especially the ones that we talk to. So before we go further in the conversation, I feel like there's a need to almost address like kind of what is knowledge management, or at least the perception in the market. I can say that from my personal experience talking to a lot of companies, there's either like a very big misconception about knowledge, or it is largely mishandled in the company and seen or perceived in one manner versus like as something that should be really like collaborative across the company in a single source of truth. I'm kind of curious to hear some of your experience there, or what do you basically, and how do you define knowledge management?
See, when we're talking about knowledge or knowledge management, we want to understand what is the strategy behind it, and why do we even bother to conduct knowledge management activities within the organization. I think that what we see in organizations in many cases is that they refer to knowledge management as a technological problem. And it's not a technological problem, so it's not necessarily only a technological solution. In many cases, we have in organization knowledge silos. So different units in the organization don't really talk with one another. And we can see, for example, people investing hours and hours in developing a product or solving a solution that was already been done in the company 6 months before in another region or another unit. So it's a huge pain point, and it happens because we have those knowledge silos. Another thing is that we keep on repeating the past mistakes instead of being able to just learn from them and learn from also replicating success. So we need to understand that it's not a technological issue, and we need to understand that we need to break the silos. And for that, we need to understand what is the governance of knowledge management within the organization. Who is responsible for knowledge management? What are the roles and responsibilities? Do we work in a centralized manner when we have a knowledge management department, for example? Or do we have like a decentralized model? Then everyone in the organization is obligated to share and collaborate and create knowledge. So there are different ways to look at it. And in many cases, it's the hybrid governance model when we have someone CKO, which is responsible for knowledge management. And then we have the field that is also responsible for knowledge management. and we need to define the knowledge flows and the way that knowledge is being created and being distributed.
No, there's definitely a lot of alignment there, and I can really relate to a lot of the things that you mentioned. On the flip side, we're definitely coming and representing, I think, worlds that are very similar and struggle on a lot of similar pain points when it comes to knowledge management. I'm going to flip it really quickly, I think, to the more like external side as well. Not only everything that you said that is attributed to obviously internal knowledge management within a company, but so much of what you said in terms of the knowledge silos. I think also, single ownership, not being shared ownership. All of this definitely also translates outward. So any company that would have, customers, users, subscribers, and they need to find better ways to, communicate with them. We often find that in our world, the knowledge flow is very much broken. So what you give your agents and how they communicate with your users is not always, a single source of truth. It's not always the right or correct, content or information that should be communicated to the users, especially at a time when I think that the world is changing so quickly. More often than not, we do find that there are, I think, like technical or technological struggles there as well, which is how do you capture all of your knowledge and consolidate it right now, into whatever platform that you're using to communicate with your users. I think we'll talk about it soon in terms of like obviously trends in the market, but the market is moving towards that direction, but there's still very much, I think, like real challenges and pain points that companies have in terms of consolidation of this knowledge to one single point for communication with their users. So a lot of overlap, I think, both intrinsically and extrinsically when it comes to how a company wants to manage their knowledge. And there's a lot of different trends right now going on in the market. I mean, I'm happy to speak to some of those, but I know you also have some data to share there as well in terms of, some of the trends and the data that we're seeing during these times, and also like how are companies preparing themselves to work remotely when it comes to knowledge management.
Yeah, so I think that an interesting data we have also in the Human Capital Trends report is that actually 75% of the organization, they stated that knowledge management is essential to their success. But then only 9% stated that they are well prepared with a good and profound knowledge management solution. And I was thinking in the last couple of days, what may be the reason for that, for this gap between the two. And I think that maybe the source of that is around the pain point that has to do with search. So we know from another survey that the average employee spends 20% of his time looking for and trying to find information. This is the equivalent to 1 day per week. A lot of time to look for a document. So if we want to enhance knowledge management experience in the organization, we need to deal with search. We need to improve the search. The thing is that to do that, we need to invest a lot of efforts in restructuring the knowledge in some cases, building the knowledge architecture and the content templates and the tagging, and that might be a lot of effort to some of the companies. So now we see more and more companies using auto tagging and auto classification technologies that will enable them just to quickly structure and tag the knowledge, and by that solving the search issue and just enhancing all of the knowledge management experience within the organization.
There's the duality to this conversation, which I think is what makes it so interesting, right? There's that, like we said it before, that intrinsic struggle, but also like, how do I outwardly communicate this to companies? We often find that companies, whether they're struggling on the external side or internal side, it's usually pretty much on both fronts. I have yet to meet like companies that do it really, really awesomely well on both sides, which is like, I know how to communicate to my users, but I also know how to serve, all of the teams and departments and across my organization. On the flip side, I think a very well-known stat is that, only 1 out of 10 of your customers is actually going to take the time to open a ticket. And that's crazy in and of itself when you think about it, because just from a volume perspective, that means that 90% of your customers are not going to do that, and they're going to leave inherently frustrated because they were not able to find, an answer to their question. Most people don't want to escalate today's, to an agent or to wait time for their email or chat or phone call or whatnot to be answered. They want to feel empowered and enabled, similarly to what you were saying about employees, to solve their, problems right there and then. That's a certain like level of expectation that our customers have. And very few of them are being met with that need, in terms of also self-service and case deflection. So I think that that's also something that companies are putting a lot of efforts in, but need to better measure a lot about the search, right? So like unanswered searches, or what are my users looking for, but that I'm not optimizing.
So we can see a direct relationship between a good knowledge management and the way we can improve the KPIs and the way we can improve customer satisfaction in this case. So I think that that connecting those dots makes it very interesting and very important when we're talking about the knowledge management domain.
I think there's like a lot of different layers of complexity here, obviously, in terms of like how knowledge plays into it. I know that we've been talking to a lot of companies in the last few months with everything that's happening, obviously, with this global landscape. And, companies lead with a KPI, like there's an end goal. So we'll oftentimes hear when they're talking to us, like, I want to improve on self-service, or I want to, increase my case deflection by this and this percentage. So they kind of like start tactically at the end. But then when you start tracing those steps, you start to understand that there's so much that needs to happen in order for, for a company to obviously impact that case deflection. And a lot of times it has to do with the whole perception of how you're looking at knowledge management, that it's like needs to be intrinsically embedded across an entire funnel of a user's journey. And oftentimes we find that people don't just escalate like in one channel, they're going to start hitting up companies in like multiple concurrent channels. That's just like, I think, a human nature thing that happens. So I'm like I'm calling and then I'm chatting you, and then, oh, I also found your email address. So I'm starting to hit up, your support. And before you know it, like somebody has created 3 different tickets on one different issue. And I think there's also like knowledge management, not so much from like an agent to customer perspective, but also how do you align all of that from a customer journey and a customer timeline perspective and say, hey, Naomi right now has hit you up on 3 different channels, like she needs help now. And this is like how we recommend that you should answer her to help solve that issue. So I think sometimes reverse engineering it in that way is something that really helps companies kind of wrap their heads around something that I think is difficult to execute on. One of the things that we talk a lot about for the strategy when it comes to customer experience is contextual knowledge. And I think that that's largely overlooked today. And it could be something as simple as like, I'm inside your product, or I'm in my account area, or I'm just basically experiencing this company as a brand, whether I'm in my app or I'm on the web, or any part of like this company's experience. How do I like anticipate a customer's need before it happens? And a lot of that can actually surprisingly be solved with knowledge. So I know we talked about it a little bit as well, but there's that hyper kind of personalization and providing contextual knowledge wherever that user is within the funnel. And that's something that I think is like a guiding strategy that, companies should really try to obviously like adhere to, versus just trying to focus like on the actual numbers and the metrics, saying, I want to improve case deflection by 3%. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents on that. What, in your opinion, are some of the, support practices that, can be put in place, or some of the, how do you see this basically sparking companies to put better knowledge practices in place today?
As a customer, I don't want to be given just a generic answer. I want you as an agent to know who I am, to know my profile, to know maybe to anticipate what I'm going to say or ask, and just give me the right answer that is relevant to me exactly. So personalization, I think it's the maybe next generation of service. And I think that we need to really invest in that. And we need to use AI and cognitive elements to enable that. Another way we can maybe push towards this direction is integrating between CRM systems to knowledge management systems. So here we have the full picture of the company's knowledge and also of the profile of the user or the customer over in the other side of the line. And I want to be able to get the information in self-service and save my time. So I think that this is another trend or something that we need to inspire to give our customers. The thing is that as a company, we don't want to invest in duplicating the efforts of managing knowledge once for internal use and for the agents, and then for external use for end clients. So we would want to be able to leverage the internal knowledge base and to just make it accessible through every channel in self-service to the clients. And just by that give, I think, the best user experience for our customers.
But I think if we paint a picture as well, like a larger picture or more of like a bird's view from like a top-down perspective, I think there's a lot of like hype words and trends. And there's a tendency to look at these as just, we talked about it earlier, like siloed, right? So a lot of times companies will look to solve like single problems or single, specific points in the funnel that might be broken. And I think this goes back to probably the first point that we said, which is not looking at it as a siloed matter, but trying to really understand how all of these different channels and layers culminate together. And I think trying to fix them, by singly focusing on just one specific broken part of the funnel is what causes, the larger picture to be affected.
For different units within the organization, they keep on struggling with that. They don't have the problem to where to document the documents or the knowledge. The issue here is that we have too many places and too many repositories, and we need to understand what to choose now, and then to struggle where to search it. So I think that the single source of truth that you mentioned is essential here for any place in the organization. And we need to enable them maybe one gate, even if we are not consolidating all the repositories, which some of the organizations choose to do, but we need to integrate the repositories to one gate that will enable them this experience of a single source of truth.
It's not only how do I communicate externally with my customers, but how do I capture all of that and make sense of it, especially in like SaaS-centric companies, back to my product managers, the marketing team, R&D, but how do I really like bridge that back internally in the company? So that's definitely, I think, just talking to a lot of companies, there's a very, very big challenge there. And how do I enable my agents just to do it? And I know that something that we hear all the time is like, I just need one place, one gate, one tab, one inbox. It's expressed in a lot of different words. It could be even one UI, but just give my agents one single place that can capture, the customer journey and everything that they need in one place to answer like a ticket and resolve it. So I think that there's a lot of like technology and a lot of trends there. We've done, past webinars on this as well, but I think there's going to be a challenge technologically right now is how do you culminate all of these to give, your agents and also inwards to the company, everything that you need in one single place. I know that we work really hard to do that every day at Answers. How do you see the work evolving, in the foreseeable future when it comes to knowledge management?
I think that what we see now that reskilling or teaching someone the new job, reskilling is actually dead, and employees now need to be resilient, and we need to teach them to learn how to learn. In the future, we will have what we call super teams. So it won't be only AI helping me as an employee, but we will be working together. We will be a combination of AI cognitive bots and human experts.
I love what you said as well about the super teams. I think it's something that a lot of people watching will be able to relate, to kind of that resiliency of what, teams are going through right now and learning how to learn. And and then, add now that layer of analytics or insights on that, and how do I, make sense of all of this and, turn that into actionable insights going forward. So I think that's a good way to close, and good, food for thought. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure, and always a great time talking about this and more.
Thank you so much, Naomi. It was great chatting with you.
Yeah, thanks, Inbal. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.